The middle class in America is facing a dual crisis of record homelessness and soaring rents. According to the latest data from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, there were 653,000 people experiencing homelessness in the U.S. in 2023, the highest number since 2007. That's 1 in every 500 Americans who don't have a place to call home, and the situation is particularly severe in some states, like California, where there were 181,000 homeless people in 2023, which equates to roughly 1 in every 200 people. At the same time, rents are skyrocketing across the country, making it harder for many Americans to afford a decent place to live. According to a report by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, there is no state, county, or metropolitan area in the U.S. where a full-time worker earning the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour can afford a modest 2-bedroom rental home at fair market rent. The report also found that a renter earning the average hourly wage of $18.78 would need to work 79 hours per week to afford a 2-bedroom home, or 63 hours per week to afford a 1-bedroom home. The rent crisis is affecting not only low-income workers, but also middle-income earners who are finding it harder to keep up with the rising costs of living. According to the most recent data, there were approximately 8 million Americans behind on rent. The survey also found that 56% of renters were cost-burdened, meaning they spent more than 30% of their income on rent, and 30% were severely cost-burdened, meaning they spent more than 50% of their income on rent. The surging rents are one of the main factors contributing to the homelessness epidemic in America. As more and more people are unable to afford their rent, they face the risk of eviction, displacement, or foreclosure. Many of them end up in shelters, on the streets, or in other precarious situations. The homelessness crisis is especially acute in urban areas, where the demand for housing exceeds the supply, and where the cost of living is higher than in rural or suburban areas. For example, in New York City, the largest and most populous city in the country, there were over 60,000 people sleeping in shelters every night in 2024, and thousands more in subways, parks, or other public spaces. The city also faced an influx of asylum seekers from Central and South America, who added to the pressure on the already strained shelter system. The homelessness crisis has serious consequences for the individuals, families, and communities affected by it. Homelessness is associated with poor physical and mental health, increased exposure to violence and crime, reduced access to education and employment, and diminished social and civic participation. Homelessness also imposes a significant cost on the public sector, as it requires more spending on emergency services, healthcare, law enforcement, and social welfare. Moreover, homelessness undermines the social fabric and the moral values of the nation, as it reflects the failure to provide the basic human right of adequate housing to all citizens. The homelessness and rent crisis is part of a larger nationwide housing crisis where rents are skyrocketing and affordable options are disappearing. According to the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University, the U.S. had a shortage of 7.2 million affordable rental homes for extremely low-income households in 2024, meaning that only 37 affordable and available homes existed for every 100 extremely low-income renter households. The report also found that the number of households spending more than half their income on housing rose to 22.4 million in 2024. The lack of affordable housing and the high home prices leave many Americans struggling to achieve or maintain home ownership, which has long been considered a key component of the American dream. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the homeownership rate in the country was 65.7% in 2024. The decline was more pronounced among young adults, minorities, and low-income households, who faced more barriers to accessing credit, saving for a down payment, and competing in a tight market. The rent and housing crisis affects both tenants and landlords, who are also facing financial strain and challenges. Many landlords are small property owners who rely on rental income to cover their own expenses. However, with the pandemic-induced recession, the eviction moratorium, and the delayed rental assistance, many landlords have seen their income reduced or interrupted, while their costs have remained the same or increased. Some landlords have resorted to raising rents, selling properties, or exiting the market, which further reduces the supply and affordability of rental housing. The rent and housing crisis, therefore, has a direct impact on the middle class, who own or rent most of the housing units in the country. The middle class squeeze, however, goes beyond housing. It also involves other aspects of living expenses, such as food, transportation, healthcare, education, and entertainment. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Consumer Price Index, which measures the changes in the prices of goods and services, rose by 3.1% in 2024. One of the main drivers of inflation was food, which saw its prices surge by 2.2% in 2024. The rising food prices have squeezed the middle-class budgets, as they spend a larger share of their income on groceries than the wealthy or the poor. Another major expense for the middle class is transportation, which includes the costs of owning, operating, and maintaining a vehicle. According to the 2023 YDC report, the annual expense of owning and operating a new vehicle has increased to an average yearly cost of $12,182, equating to a monthly expenditure of $1,015. The increase was mainly due to the higher prices of gas, which reached an average of $3.38 per gallon in 2024. The rising transportation costs have added financial pressure on the middle-class families, who depend on their cars for commuting, shopping, and leisure. Other costs that have increased for the middle class include healthcare, education, and entertainment. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, the average annual premium for employer-sponsored health insurance for a family of 4 was $23,968 in 2024. The increase was driven by the rising costs of medical services, drugs and devices, as well as the growing demand for healthcare due to the aging population and the pandemic aftermath. Despite a seemingly solid job market, with an unemployment rate of 3.7% in 2024, many middle-class workers faced challenges and burnout in finding and keeping a decent job. According to a report by Glassdoor, the average time to hire for a job in the US was 24 days in 2024, up from 42 days in 2019. The report also found that the average number of applications per job was 250, and the average callback rate was 2%. The overwhelming job application process, coupled with the high competition, the low wages, the long hours, and the lack of benefits, contributed to the job market woes and the dissatisfaction of the middle-class workers. The economic hardships faced by the middle class were not accidental, but intentional. They were the result of the government's deliberate economic adjustments, which aimed to tighten the monetary policy, curb the inflation, and reduce the debt. The increase in the interest rate had a ripple effect on various aspects of life, such as the mortgage rates, the credit card rates, the student loan rates, and the car loan rates, making it more expensive to borrow and repay money. The increase in the interest rate also affected the stock market, the bond market, the currency market, and the international trade, creating volatility and uncertainty in the global economy. The middle class in America is being forced out by a combination of factors, such as the homelessness and rent crisis, the housing affordability crisis, the rising costs of living, the stagnant income, the job market woes, the intentional economic adjustments, and the election year impact. These factors have eroded the economic security, the social mobility, and the political representation of the middle class, who have been left behind by the changing economy and society. The middle class, once the engine of growth and the symbol of democracy, is now facing an existential threat, and its survival is at stake.